For centuries, billions of people have placed their faith in the idea of a single, all-powerful God, Yahweh, the God of the Bible. He is said to be eternal, unchanging, the sole divine being who created the universe, guided the Israelites, and stands as the foundation of three major world religions. But what if this entire concept is a fabrication? What if Yahweh is nothing more than the product of myth-making, cultural assimilation, and historical revisionism? The evidence is overwhelming. Yahweh did not start as the one true God. He was not the God of Abraham, nor was he even known to the earliest Israelites. Instead, Yahweh's name emerges in history as a minor deity, likely worshipped by desert tribes in southern Canaan and later adopted by Israel. His transformation from a local tribal god into the omnipotent creator of the universe wasn't divine. It was the result of political necessity, religious reform, and centuries of rewriting history to erase the truth. Ancient inscriptions, linguistic studies, and even the Bible itself reveal cracks in the official story. Early Israelites did not believe in a single god. They were polytheists, worshipping multiple deities, including El, Baal, and Asherah. Yahweh was a latecomer, a god whose identity had to be merged, rebranded, and imposed over centuries to serve the political agendas of Israelite rulers and exiled priests. This is not speculation. The historical and archaeological record tells a very different story from what religion has claimed for millennia. The God of the Bible was not always the God of the Bible. But today, we strip away that myth. We expose where Yahweh actually came from, how he was shaped by older gods, and why the biblical version of Yahweh is a later fabrication. If you've ever questioned religion, if you've ever wondered whether the God of the Bible is real or just another human invention, this is the proof you've been looking for. The first glaring problem with the biblical narrative is that Yahweh does not appear in history as the original God of Israel. If Yahweh had always been the supreme deity, reigning over the heavens and worshipped by the patriarchs, we should expect to find clear historical and archaeological evidence of his worship in the earliest Israelite settlements. The earliest known mentions of Yahweh come from Egyptian inscriptions dated between 1400 and 1200 BCE. These texts do not refer to Yahweh as the God of Israel, nor do they place him in Canaan. Instead, they identify Yahweh as a deity associated with a group of nomadic tribes called the Shasu, who lived in the deserts of Edom, Midian, and the Sinai region, far south of early Israelite settlements. This is a major problem for biblical literalists. If Yahweh was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and if he was always worshipped by the Israelites, why does his name first appear in connection with foreign, non-Israelite desert tribes? The answer is simple. Yahweh was not originally an Israelite god. He was likely a regional storm or war deity, worshipped by Midianites and Kenites before being incorporated into Israelite religion. This theory is supported by the Midianite-Kenite hypothesis, which argues that Yahweh's worship was introduced to Israel by outsiders. In the Bible, Moses, who is said to have led the Israelites out of Egypt, spends years living among the Midianites, even marrying the daughter of a Midianite priest named Jethro. This is no coincidence. The Midianites, not the Israelites, were likely the ones who originally worshipped Yahweh. The absence of Yahweh in early Canaanite religion further reinforces this. The Ugaritic texts, which date back to the same time period and document the religious beliefs of the broader Canaanite world, mention gods like El, Baal, and Asherah, but Yahweh is completely missing. If Yahweh had been worshipped in Canaan as the Bible claims, his name should appear in these texts. Instead, we see a polytheistic pantheon centered around El, the actual high god of the region. So what happened? How did a foreign tribal deity from the deserts of Midian become the national god of Israel? The answer lies in religious assimilation and political necessity. Early Israelite tribes did not start out as worshippers of Yahweh. They were Canaanites who initially worshipped El, Baal, and Asherah. At some point, however, Yahweh was brought into their religious framework, likely through contact with Midianite or Kenite groups, and his worship gradually merged with the existing god El. This wasn't just a religious shift, it was a political move. By merging Yahweh with El, Israelite leaders solidified their identity around a single, distinct god, separating themselves from their Canaanite neighbors. Over time, Yahweh's status grew, and his older connections to the Midianites and Kenites were erased from history. Instead, biblical writers crafted a new origin story, placing Yahweh at the very foundation of Israelite belief, even though history tells a very different story. Yahweh's foreign origins are a critical crack in the biblical narrative. They reveal that the God of Israel wasn't even originally worshipped by Israelites. He had to be introduced, adapted, and reshaped. What we think of today as the biblical God wasn't always Israel's God at all. The biblical claim that Yahweh was always the one true God of Israel collapses under the weight of historical evidence. Early Israelites were not monotheists. They were polytheists, worshipping multiple gods just like their Canaanite neighbors. Yahweh's rise to supremacy was not the result of divine revelation, but of political strategy, religious reform, and centuries of rewriting history. Long before Yahweh became the supreme deity of Israel, El was worshipped as the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon. The very name Israel means El persists, or may El rule. If Yahweh had always been the God of Israel, this wouldn't make sense. The nation's very identity was tied to another god. The Bible itself preserves traces of this older religious structure. In Exodus chapter 6 verse 3, Yahweh states, "I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh I did not make myself known to them." This is a stunning admission. It suggests that the patriarchs, supposedly the founders of Israel, did not originally worship Yahweh. Instead, they knew and revered El, the god of the Canaanites. But Yahweh didn't just absorb El. He also took on the attributes of Baal, the powerful storm god of the Canaanites. Baal was one of the most widely worshipped gods in Canaan. He was seen as the god of storms, fertility, and war, often depicted as riding the clouds and wielding thunderbolts. These same descriptions later became associated with Yahweh. Psalm 68 verse 4 says, "Sing to God, sing in praise of his name, extol him who rides on the clouds." This is nearly identical to how Baal was described in older Canaanite texts. The Bible's intense hostility toward Baal worship suggests a deliberate attempt to erase Yahweh's connections to him. Early Israelite religion wasn't centered on one god. It was a complex system of multiple deities, including Yahweh, El, Baal, and Asherah. Archaeological discoveries confirm this. Inscriptions found at Kuntilet Adrud, dating to around 800 BCE, explicitly mention Yahweh and his Asherah, showing that Yahweh was once worshipped alongside a divine consort. This changed over time, but not because of some grand revelation. The shift toward monotheism was driven by political necessity, especially during the reforms of King Josiah in the 7th century BCE. The Book of Kings describes how Josiah destroyed shrines to other gods, including those to Baal and Asherah. He centralized worship in Jerusalem, eliminating competing religious sites. This political rebranding of Yahweh didn't just erase other gods. It rewrote Israel's entire religious history. The Bible was not recording what actually happened. It was shaping a new reality, creating the illusion that Yahweh had always been Israel's one true God. But history tells a different story. Yahweh was not always supreme. He was one of many, a God who had to be merged, rewritten, and politically enforced before becoming the deity recognized today. The biblical writers did not record history as it happened. They reshaped and rewrote it, constructing a religious narrative that would justify Yahweh's dominance and erase his origins as a lesser deity. Nowhere is this rewriting of history more evident than in the period following the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. This moment was a turning point. The Babylonian Empire had conquered Judah, burned down the temple, and exiled much of the population. The Israelite elite, now living in Babylon, faced a crisis of faith. Their God, Yahweh, had failed to protect them. This theological shift turned Yahweh from a national deity into an all-powerful, universal God. The destruction of Judah was no longer seen as evidence of Yahweh's failure, but as proof of his power. He had allowed his own people to be punished for their disobedience, reinforcing his control rather than diminishing it. The biblical texts written during and after the Babylonian exile reflect this dramatic shift. Passages that previously acknowledged the existence of other gods were rewritten or reinterpreted. Yahweh was no longer just the God of Israel. He became the only true God, the creator of the universe, the judge of all nations. This transformation was not just about theology. It was about power. The priests and scribes who redefined Yahweh's identity were not just preserving faith, they were ensuring their own authority. A singular, omnipotent God meant a singular, centralized religious system with them at the top. Monotheism, rather than being a natural evolution of faith, was a carefully constructed tool for social and political control. The Bible's rewriting of Yahweh's past is most evident in how it erases his connections to other gods. What remains today is a version of Yahweh that bears little resemblance to his origins. The Bible presents him as eternal, yet history shows that his worship had a clear beginning. The Bible claims he was always Israel's God, yet early Israelite religion tells a different story. The Yahweh known today is not the original Yahweh. He is a reconstructed deity, reshaped by centuries of political and religious maneuvering. He is not the creator of the universe. He is a product of human hands, crafted to serve the needs of those who wrote his story. The Yahweh of the Bible is not the Yahweh of history. Yahweh was not originally the God of Israel. The earliest Israelites, like their Canaanite neighbors, worshipped multiple gods. El was the high god, Baal was the storm god, and Asherah was the mother goddess. Yahweh was either unknown or a minor deity at best. His first historical appearances place him in the deserts of Edom and Midian, not in Israel. This aligns with the idea that Yahweh's worship was imported into Israelite culture rather than originating there. The Bible itself gives hints of this, but later writers worked to erase these traces, rewriting Yahweh's story to make it appear as though he had always been Israel's only God. Even after Yahweh was adopted, he did not immediately become the sole deity. The shift toward monotheism was not a natural religious progression. It was a forced transformation, largely driven by political leaders like King Josiah, who sought to consolidate religious power by eliminating all gods except Yahweh. The final step in Yahweh's transformation came during the Babylonian exile. When Jerusalem fell and the temple was destroyed, the Israelites needed a way to explain why their God had seemingly abandoned them. The answer they created was not that Yahweh had failed, but that he had allowed their suffering as a punishment for disobedience. In exile, Yahweh was no longer just the God of Israel. He became the God of everything, the only God that existed. This was a theological shift born from crisis, not revelation. The biblical texts written during and after this period reflect this reinvention, erasing Israel's polytheistic past and constructing a new identity centered around Yahweh as the universal ruler. The Bible presents him as eternal, yet his name does not appear in the oldest Canaanite religious traditions. The Bible claims he was always Israel's God, yet early Israelites worshipped multiple deities. The Bible insists that he alone is God, yet his attributes were borrowed from other gods, reshaped and rebranded until all other names were forgotten. Yahweh is not the creator of the universe. He is a creation of history, molded by the needs of those who ruled and wrote the stories that would define a nation. His transformation from a regional war god to the singular deity of billions was not an act of divine truth, but of human power. If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.